welcome back. This is part 2 of painting on black paper. If you missed part 1, you'll want to watch it before continuing with this lesson. In our last session, we talked about why we might choose to work on black paper. We sketched our scene, we blocked in our main colors, taking care to leave black showing through in the areas we wanted it to, just like in underpainting, and we started defining our big shapes. In this lesson, we're going to start adding more layers to start building up detail, and we're going to think about our light source and how that affects the light and dark areas of the painting and what colors and values we'll want to choose. If you're watching this on Patreon, you're seeing the full uncut video. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll still be able to get some great information for painting on black paper. But if you want to dive deeper, head on over to my Patreon. It's under Tiffany Williams Fine Art. Not only do I post the full videos, but also lots of extra content I don't share anywhere else. It's only $5 a month, and I'd love to have you join my Patreon family. If you prefer to support me on YouTube, that's just as awesome. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you don't miss any of my new content. Now, let's head over to the easel and get dusty. Alright, so here's where we left off after our last lesson. We are going to go through and start firming up our shapes, our color choices, and our values. So let's talk about where the light source is coming from and the quality of the light. If we look at the photo, the light, there's not a lot of shadows, and the light is coming from kind of behind me and shining in this direction. So everything that is facing the camera is well illuminated and the shadows are behind them. So we don't really have any left to right shadows, which is, or I'm sorry, left to right or right to left light, which is really what creates drama when you get that stark contrast between values in a scene. We don't really have that going on here because it was a cloudy day. The light was very diffused and it was a little bit behind me. This was about maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So it was high overhead, but behind me. So we're going to have to create our drama and our deep values and brighter lights using the scene itself. So we know in this area here is really the darkest area in the entire photo is this, the waterfall. The next darkest areas, and I'm squinting at the photo to see this, are the areas of the mulch and then right along the edges of the grass. So those are going to be the areas where we want to have our darkest values. And then our lightest values are the rocks and then also the sky. All right, so I have 3 blues that I've pulled out. I'm not sure how they're going to look on this pink yet. Pink and blue tend to make purple, so I don't want this to go too far purple. So I've pulled a very light grayish blue. This one's more of a sky blue. It matches more closely to the color of the sky in the photo. And then this is kind of a dark, stormy, purpley gray. This might be a little too dark, but I'm actually going to start with this one, and I'm just now looking at the sky. The darkest areas are right in here, so I'm just going to swipe this across and see the feeling that I get. So this is very, very stormy. This is maybe a good color to represent some of the darker areas in the sky, but I am definitely going to want to cover most of that up with a lighter blue because it is too dark. All right, so I'm going to go with that lighter purpley blue or grayish blue. So this is giving me a better feeling of the sky. There's still a little too much pink coming through for my liking, but that'll start to go away as I build up more layers. So I'm gonna go in with this blue that's really much closer to the actual color of the sky in the photo. And you can see now as it's going on top of these other colors, as these layers are getting worked in, how it's starting to change the feeling of the sky and the painting. So right now I'm being attracted to the greens at the top. So I'm still using the same pastels I used in the first video. I haven't switched to any of the softer ones quite yet, because I still have the ability to put layers in here. So I'm going to continue doing that. So now I'm just very, very lightly dragging this down, trying to get kind of that feeling of this plant as it kind of comes up and then curls back down with the way these grasses are. So just trying to get that feeling in there. These do the same thing. Now I have a lot more variation in the tops of this plant than the photo does, and I'm doing that on purpose because I don't want just a flat, just a flat green bunch of grass there. I do want it to have a little bit more life. Now, sticking with this green, where else can I put it? So I'm definitely gonna bring some of that down here. And I'm just swiping up now because these grasses down here are just, different type of grass growing in a different direction. And I'm gonna also drop some down in this corner. So we're starting to get some color balance and some color echoing or color mirroring throughout this painting. Now I've got, this is dirty, but it's kind of this really pretty neon yellowy green kiwi color. And again, I'm just working by color, and right now I'm in the mindset of green. So just sprinkling some of this lighter yellowy green kind of randomly over here on the side. Just small little strokes. I'm really just touching and kind of letting the drag happen as I pull the pastel away. Not trying to control it very much, just letting it go where it wants to. And we do have some of this lighter green happening here. We don't want to go too crazy with it because it does give the impression that it's sunlit. Right now, that's what's coming out of this to me is this bright green is feeling like the sun is glinting off of these things, which it is, but we don't want to go too crazy with it. So I'm just adding a little bit where we have more of the highlights on the front side, but I'm taking care to leave those dark colors showing through underneath because we don't want to lose that depth. All right, so now I'm looking at the rocks. So we've established a really good base for the rocks. Now it's time to start putting in a few more of the individual rocks, especially this big one at the top. Along the sides, we have a lot of small rocks, and then they get bigger. These ones in the front are really big, and then the ones in the background aren't quite as big. So wanting to keep the size in mind as we go. So I'm gonna go back to this dark purple that I used in the sky, and I'm gonna bring it down in here. And always thinking about, you know, where else can I put some of these colors? I love a simple palette. When I first started painting, oh my gosh, I used every single color that I had in on my tray over there. And it just got to be really overwhelming. And my paintings, you know, they got muddy, they were chaotic, there wasn't a lot of order to them. So I try to use the same colors wherever I can, just to create that feeling of balance and not overwhelming the eyes. And I don't want to create mud either. So I think that was the right purple. Definitely grade up these rocks a little bit more for me. All right, let's see. Okay, so I've chosen, this is kind of in between the pink and the peach, kind of a pinky peach. So all of these bright peach rocks are, you know, they're too bright to stand on their own as a rock. So I want to dull those down just a little bit. And also the pink, you know, a little too bright. And again, I'm wiping my pastel off between each stroke. So I want to establish that, and we'll go in and fix that. I know it looks like just an ugly line right now, but we'll go in and give that some personality in a minute. All right, so now I'm just kind of using a curving swipe motion. I like to swipe and flick my pastels and dab. I'm not really big at just kind of drawing lines like I did right there. But I'm trying to create that more rounded feeling of these rocks. And trying to stay random with it, not creating the same motion over and over again. You don't want to repeat yourself or you'll start to create patterns, which in this particular scene, we don't really have patterns that we want to be creating. All right, so I'm gonna go back to this gray, but or this grayish purple, but I'm gonna break it in half. Because that stick I used up in the sky was a little too big here. So I'm gonna come back in and just reinforce some of these grays. All right, so this is a very, very pale pink. Almost looks white. I'm not gonna use this in a lot of places. I'm just gonna drop it in. All right, and then this is a really pale creamy yellow. Again, almost white. I'm gonna move on. I'm not gonna keep tweaking these rocks because if I do, I'm going to overdo it. I'll come back to them. So now my next thing I wanna tackle is my water. So when we put the water in, we used this dark olive and then we went over it with a little bit of a lighter green. So I'm gonna kind of come back in here with that same olive. And now that we have our rocks where we want them to be, I'm going to use my olive a little more purposefully here, just to get this feeling like a flat surface of this water. So I'm using the edge, but I am dragging it horizontally, and it's making these more horizontal kind of marks. And that's gonna help that feeling of the water just kind of flowing down this little stream. I'm going back to my lighter shade that I also used earlier. Same thing, just putting in these horizontal marks. Trying to do it very randomly, but now you can see that this is starting to kind of look like it's flowing downhill or flowing towards us, I guess. Well, I guess water flows downhill, right? Now I want to come back in here and reinforce some of that darkness that's in there. And I'm going to go with a really, really dark violet. So I'm trying to stick with my harder pastels right now. I don't want to be getting too soft yet. So otherwise I won't be able to put many more layers in here. And I think I'm gonna pull out the trusty, oh yeah, see how much darker that is. This is everybody's favorite dark violet. It really, really brings shadow, but this is also a very soft pastel. So not going to be able to put too many more layers in down here without pulling out the fixative. And then we have the opening. Okay. I'm gonna give it a quick spritz with a fixative because I've had to go to some softer pastels. Make sure you shake it up really good. And I'm just gonna give it a light spray. And I'm only gonna spray in this area. That's where I used the soft pastels. So I'm gonna give that a minute to dry. So I'm gonna go through, start really kind of refining this rock up here. I'm gonna use a little more of a reddish, a little bit of a darker reddish brown here. And this is a harder pastel again. This is still, I'm still using the Rembrandts. I'm just going to carry that through. I also don't want to get rid of all this black that's peeking through. You know, that's why I chose the black paper to work on. So I'm trying to work around it and work with it and let it still shine and do its job. I'm just taking this darker red and I'm just using it to kind of find some of the edges of these rocks. All right, so we also have our lip. You see how that fixative gave me some more tooth, because now I can get that lip put in there. All right, so I'm gonna go back to my very, very pale pink that I used a little bit down in here. I'm just gonna use this now to put this little highlight on this rock. And then I'm very lightly gonna pull this water over it. We have a lot of splashing going on down here. So I'm just gonna dab at it. It's gonna look like a bunch of weird lines for now. Not really trying to get the splashing and all the beautiful things that are happening just yet. Just wanting to kind of save space for what's going on. I'm using my fingernail here to drag that green through this light pink. I don't want to draw lines with the edge of my pastel. And the way it was applying was too thick and too bright. I wanted it to be a little more subtle, so I'm just using my fingernail through my glove. You could use any kind of real fine blending tool. But just trying to create some movement in this water. Let's come back up here, get this top of this rock, a little bit of definition. So it's obviously not perfectly flat. So I want to just kind of outline the shape a little. So I'm going to start switching now to softer pastels because I've run out of tooth that the Rembrandts can really grip onto. Softer pastels are going to be able to grip onto the little bit of tooth that's left there. Yeah, I like that color. It's not really the color that we see in the photo, but I like it. It definitely goes well with some of the other colors in the rocks. I'm just using this to give a little bit of life to this rock at the top here. And I think I'll pull a little of it down into my other rocks as well. All right, now this might be a little too green. Let me see what you look like. Okay, so this is a really dark brown. And I'm gonna just use this underneath. This is gonna be creating some of these shadows on this rock. And I wanna get away from the perfectly horizontal lines throughout the whole thing. I'm going to keep this brown and I'm going to start pulling this into these areas between all these rocks. And I'm just very randomly kind of touching it and dragging it in through, especially these smaller rocks. And this is going to start creating a little more dimension and depth over here. I'm not trying to make perfect lines. I'm not trying to really be careful. I'm not even really trying to draw between the colors. You know, I don't really care that some of these rocks are being divided in half with this. Some of these lines are bigger than others, but you know, we do have some of these. And taking a look from a distance to see that, you know, what I'm creating is what I have in my head. And when you're up this close to a painting, it can be really, really challenging. You can't really see the forest for the trees, to use that old adage. All right, so I'm going to come back in here and pull some of this dark brown back into behind the water. I'm still missing depth right in here. So when I look at the photo, you can see the rocks back in there. They're very dark. There's a few areas where the wetness of the rocks is kind of catching the light. So I'm gonna take my really dark violet again, and I'm gonna outline these rocks just so that I give myself visual references to work with here. Because otherwise I am getting a little lost with all the movement that's happening. So I'm just helping myself out. That doesn't mean these are gonna stay like this, but these outlines that I'm creating are just to help me. All right, so I'm gonna widen these outlines because there's not a lot of the rock that you can see. It's a lot of darkness. This is a really, really dark turquoise. Like really dark, very dark greeny turquoise. I'm using that because the rocks in the back here are very, very dark. And I'm gonna pull in, I'm also gonna use some really dark burgundy. All right, I'm gonna do one more spritz of my fixative here. Okay, so I have pulled out a blue earth. This is very, very soft pastel. I'm barely touching the paper and it's grabbing right onto it. And I'm using this to kind of smear out a little bit of some of the marks that I put on with the harder pastels, and just to bring this darker brown into the whole area dark back here. Okay, so I'm gonna leave this for a minute just to simmer in my head. I want to come back and obviously finish the water in that area. All right, so let's move on to this front part here, the rocks and this vegetation. All right, so I've dipped into some darker, a little more on the gray side of these colors to bring a little more depth into the front areas here with my rocks. And just some more texture. These all look very you know, very flat, smooth rocks, which we know these, you know, rocks in this case are not. All right, so I'm going to come in with this green. This is a dark olivey green. And use this very, very sparingly. I'm just using it to create some texture on my rocks. I'm just very gently tapping, not really dragging much, just doing a lot of little tapping, and I'm letting the pastels, as I'm putting them on top of each other, kind of do their own blending. I'm not going to use a blending tool, just letting the pastels do their thing. All right, I have this lovely dark copper, medium copper. It might be a little similar. It's just a little brighter actually than this other copper I had in here. And again, super light touch because this is a very soft pastel. I don't want to have it take over the scene. When you start getting to these uppermost layers, you definitely need to lighten up your touch. And then the last one we're going to use today is this turquoise or teal. I think it's more of a teal, but it's definitely not as saturated. Just going to drop some of that in here as well. And this is representing some of the grays in the rocks. It's a nice contrast to the orange tones. You know, teal and orange are complementary, so wanting to get a little bit of that feeling in here. I think we're at a good stopping place for this video. So we have talked about our light source as coming this way. We've been working on getting in more layers, kind of defining some of the bigger elements in here, our grasses, our rocks, our water. So our next video, which I think will be the last one, the last lesson, will be really just refining all the details in here. Obviously, we still need to do a lot of work in the front part here. We need to get a little more definition in the rocks, finish up our water, get some more definition in our grasses. So this is, the next lesson is really where we're gonna start playing with values and working on like how do we represent individual grass blades without drawing them all, and getting these beautiful flowers in here in these nice little clusters without having to draw every single petal. So that's going to be our mission for the next video, is getting this painting finished. So I hope you enjoy this lesson so far and you're learning a lot about painting on black paper. And I will see you next lesson to finish this up. Take care.